Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3 in Amsterdam just concluded on Sunday, and Nadu combo, surprising to no one, absolutely obliterated the competition. Now, typically, I am not the person who calls for bannings right after a Pro Tour or right after a deck has a good performance at a big tournament. But this one, we got to dig into the numbers and see whether Nadu should be banned immediately or not. I'm Les Alex. Let's jump into this one. All right, so let's take a look at this info I have on screen. We're going to give you the info from the Nadu deck from the Pro Tour this weekend, and then I'm going to compare it to another deck that is strikingly similar. And the numbers might surprise you, but let's take a look. You can read them all on screen, but I'm going to go through why each one of these alone might not be worthy of a ban, but when combined, it's pretty damning evidence, especially when you compare it to another deck. But let's take a look. First up, we have a win rate of 59%. The deck closest in win rate was Esper Goryo's at 55%. So win rate 59%, the next best deck was 55%. That's 4% higher. And another deck in Magic's history, which we'll be talking about in a moment, had an even worse win rate. So when you compare these two historically, because you can't just say, oh, this deck is not deterministic, had a great conversion rate, unfun play patterns, all the things that you see listed here, you can't just pick out one of these things. You got to have some historical relevance and some numbers to back up your grab the pitchforks, let's ban these cards, in my opinion. So yes, this is not deterministic. It's not like a Storm deck where eventually it's just a combo, right? You just immediately win. It's not like Splinter Twin, where you A plus B and you just make a million dudes and you kill them. It's not like that at all. They can fizzle, and it takes a long time. In fact, this deck reminds me a lot of the second Breakfast Eggs deck from back in the day. Stanislav Sivka won the Pro Tour with it, but it was absolutely abysmal to play with. Now, if Wizards of the Coast eventually does ban this deck, this Nadu combo deck, and the main reason they cite is because it is unfun play patterns, I'm going to be upset, because in my opinion, that shouldn't matter, because fun is subjective, right? And I typically like these quote-unquote unfun decks that have had success in the past. KCI, Lantern Control, and of course, Second Breakfast. But let's take a look at the day 2 conversion rate. You see it right there on screen, 78. Holy smokes, that is very high, because you got to keep in mind, not every single player playing this deck is among the best players in the world, like the Simon Nielsen's, who did win the Pro Tour, and shout out to them for winning. Had an amazing performance, and of course, just playing the best deck in the format. And then we take a look, like I said, unfun play patterns. This, in my opinion, is... I see why Wizards of the Coast looks at this and often bans decks based on the unfun play patterns. But in my opinion, it's kind of a soft reason to do so, just because I selfishly like playing these kinds of decks. And then we have the next point. 25.5% of the PT metagame was Nadu. Holy smokes. That's pretty sizable point. And I'm adding Bant and 4-color Nadu into this statistic because they are very similar decks. Yes, you know, there's obviously Bowmasters, Thoughtseize, things like that in the 4-color version. I'm adding them together. And another thing, this is incredible. This is actually possibly the most damning statistic of this entire list. 5 copies into the top 8 of PT MH3. And that is so many. But if we compare it to another deck from Magic's history, we see that these numbers are not only very high for this PT, but it's high for Magic's history. Let's take a look. Of course, I'm talking about Hogaak. Hogaak was the talk of the town back at Mythic Championship 4. However, the win rate, less. The day 2 conversion rate, less. The metagame share, less. And of course, they only put one into the top 8, one copy into the top 8 of Mythic Championship 4 when everybody knew about this deck. And I want to say that is kind of where you have to start the bar here, because both of these decks, everyone knew about these decks going into the tournament. Now, back if we look at the amount of Leyline of the Voids played back in the day, it was the most played card in all decks, which means people were playing 4 copies to try and stop Hogaak back in the day. And that's probably why only 1 copy made it in the top 8. But the win rate was less by a pretty decent margin, right? 56 to 59. That's pretty decent margin when you're talking about Magic the Gathering numbers. We're talking about hundreds of games being played over these 3 days of Magic being played. The day 2 conversion rate, of course, is pretty noticeably, pretty sizably less. Also, unfun play patterns. Both of these decks have unfun play patterns. Again, this is the softest reason, in my opinion, to ban a deck. But holy smokes, if you played back when Hogaak was a menace and just terrorizing the format, we had to go months and months and months with Hogaak just absolutely destroying the format. And it was not fun. It wasn't. You had to main deck Surgicals, you had to main deck Leyline of the Voids. It wasn't fun at all. And I know a lot of people, you know, play more removal. That's always the thing we hear. Let the metagame adapt. Nah, I don't buy it here. This card is absolutely cracked. I think anybody who saw how this deck works before the metagame, I know I was saying it, and some of my friends were saying it, this deck was absolutely cracked from the rip, and these stats kind of prove that. And now, obviously, this is only one tournament, but this is the pros. This is the Pro Tour. These are the best players on the planet, and this is the deck that they chose to take to the tournament. In 25%, that's a quarter of the players playing in this tournament decided, this is just the absolute best thing to do. And then they won at a very high clip. I will say Wizards of the Coast needs to act on this sooner than later. I don't want to see a scenario where we have Nadu Summer like we did Hogaak. It was absolutely atrocious. It will be atrocious again. We have the RCQ season coming up. Wizards of the Coast, I am rarely one to grab the pitchforks and say, let's ban this card. This card's atrocious. I almost never do that. Actually, I've never made a video wanting a card banned. I've never done it. Go back on all my videos. Never made a video like that. This is the first one because I think that Wizards of the Coast needs to ban this card pretty much like yesterday, right? Before the Pro Tour even. But obviously we don't have a time machine, so I think we should ban this card before the modern RCQ season starts and people just lose their minds over this card, because the metagame is going to get so warped around Nadu, and it's going to just be an absolute inbred metagame where people are going to be trying to play Harsh Mentors and things of that nature in this deck, or in their deck rather, to beat this deck. It's not going to be a pretty thing. You're going to be seeing some really messed up deck lists if we start seeing these top 8 decks of the RCQ season when and if they don't ban this card. Also, that's the thing. I say this card. I say Nadu. That is the card, in my opinion, that they need to ban. They can't ban Shuko. They can't ban anything else. They can't take half measures. Now, I know Wizards of the Coast has a history of taking half measures, trying to ban Bridge from Below. That only made that deck more consistent and streamlined, which was absolutely crazy. It made Hogaak better. It made Hogaak better, but they can't afford to take half measures right now because these tournaments these players are playing in, I'll be playing in hopefully. Maybe you'll be playing in some RCQs as well. It's gonna be terrible. It's not gonna be fun. The bird has gotta go. What do you think though? Is Nadu as atrocious and garbage as I am claiming it to be? Or do you think maybe they should just ban Shuko? Or maybe you think that there's not any reason to ban anything. I think that would be a pretty crazy thing to say, but maybe you have a different opinion. Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Regardless of your opinion, keep it kind in there. But if you enjoy this kind of content, if you like competitive Magic the Gathering content and news, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell icon, and if you got value out of this video, hit the like button. I appreciate it. I make content weekly. But yeah, I'm Les Alex, and I will catch you all in the next one. Adios.